Thank you, Dr. Renato, for the welcoming remarks. It is our honor to invite Ms. Karima El Korri, United Nations Resident Coordinator in Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei Darussalam, to deliver the keynote address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning. Yang Amat Mulia, Tunku Zain Labidin Ibn Tuanku Muhir's founding president of IDEAS, Dr. Renato Lima de Oliveira, Associate Dean of Student Journey, Dr. Tricia Yo from IDEAS, Ms. Ira, colleagues, distinguished faculty members, students, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be with you today on a Saturday, and it's with pleasure. Please allow me to begin by expressing my deep appreciation to IDEAS for organizing today's conference and for selecting such a timely and important topic. Happy anniversary, IDEAS. Sorry for not being part of the celebration, but I trust that you had a wonderful evening on the 14th, on Wednesday. I'm confident that this gathering will spark meaningful exchanges and encourage us to reflect and hopefully shift the narrative around an issue that is of immense global significance and particular relevance to Malaysia. As we gather here today to discuss borders and belonging in a globalized world, we stand at a critical juncture in history. We're living in an era where human mobility is redefining borders and challenging old ideas of belonging. Millions are on the move, seeking safety, opportunity, and a dignified life. This is the undeniable reality of our interconnected world. Yet, in the face of unprecedented population movements, the dominant narrative surrounding human mobility is too often rooted in fear and fuels division and exclusion. My message today is that we must work together to transform this narrative, replacing fear with empathy, replacing ignorance with knowledge, and adopting a rights-based approach that upholds the dignity and worth of every person on the move, irrespective of what drives them to move, and the decision or involuntary choice that they had to make. I rarely do this in my communications, but today I'd like to start by sharing a bit of my personal story as a citizen of a world where belonging transcends borders. I am, by definition, a migrant. My country of origin is Morocco, and while I remain deeply connected to my roots, my family, and the land that I come from, the question of where home is has become far more complex. Home is Morocco, but it's also Lebanon, and more broadly the Middle East, North Africa, where I lived and worked for many years, creating new roots and connections. Currently, home is Malaysia, and with each move, I don't know how long my career is going to be, my sense of belonging expands, adapting and growing as I settle in new places. For me, belonging is not a set or felt within a frontier. It's a journey shaped by people, experiences, and communities I've encountered along the way. My story is not unique. I'm fortunate, however, to be an orderly, regular migrant, moving often safely. But for many, crossing borders is filled with uncertainty, danger, and threats as they flee conflict or hardship. Those are the others who don't belong. Those that are feared, hated, rejected, abused, discriminated against, smuggled, trafficked, detained. Countless men, women, boys and girls who are denied work, education, livelihood opportunities, often because they are perceived as a threat. Why? Because there's fear. And if we look at fear, it's a complex human emotion. It arises from a perceived threat or danger, either real or imagined. Philosophically, fear can be seen as a protective mechanism that alerts us of the potential harm and motivates us to take action. Fear can be a powerful motivator, driving us to seek safety and security. But it also can be a source of anxiety, limiting our ability to think rationally. When we don't know or fully understand the experiences and struggles of those displaced, it becomes easier to view them with suspicion rather than with empathy. This often grows to become the general sentiment, a mindset which transcends the individual and community and permeates broader society, ultimately shaping, and that's dangerously shaping and influencing policies and decisions that the governments make. A number of myths persist, and I am very happy that one of the sessions in the afternoon will be looking at debunking some of them. Myths persist around migrants, refugees, stateless, and documented persons, and others, and I will provide a definition for each because I think we need that. These myths have created an environment of misinformation, leading to xenophobia, to hate speech, to exclusionary behavior. Most migration is irregular. Refugees are a burden on host societies. Migrants and refugees take jobs from locals. Migrant increases crime rates. Migration can be stopped. These are examples of the fallacies, and please don't quote me as having said those as my statement. These are fallacies that have been debunked through definitions, international law, evidence, data, common sense, yet confusion remains. And much remains to be done in terms of raising awareness and deconstructive negative perceptions. So under this category of the others who don't belong, people on the move for various reasons, a few definitions are necessary for us to start on a good ground. I'll start with migrant. A migrant is someone who usually voluntarily crosses international borders, either temporarily or permanently, and may or may not have legal authorization to reside in the country of destination. But also migrant as a word is also an internal migrant. It could be a rural to urban migrant. It could be an urban to rural move, or between states or between cities. But we're talking international migrant, it is about crossing a border. A regular migrant crosses borders with a valid visa, work permit, documentation, legal authorization, residence permit, whatever that is, in accordance with the immigration laws of the country. An irregular migrant, and we never in the UN use the word illegal migrant, irregular migrant is a person who enters or stays in a country without the legal authorization required by the immigration law. This can happen if they don't have proper documentation, overstay a visa, or violate the conditions of their stay. But it can also happen when they're smuggled, when they're trafficked. It results in irregular migration. An asylum seeker, my second definition, is a person who has fled their home country and is seeking protection in another country. And once that asylum claim has been accepted, then they become refugee. And they are entitled then to a certain set of rights and protections under international law. But also, while they're still asylum seekers asking for that refuge, they still are entitled to the protection by under international law. A refugee, again defined already a bit, is a person who, owing to well-founded fear of persecution for various reasons, it can be race, it can be religion, it can be sexual orientation, it can be membership to a particular social group or political opinion, is outside their country of nationality and is unable or unwilling to avail themselves to the protection of that country. So they don't feel safe in their country of origin and they seek asylum to another country. And now we're also hearing about climate, refugees, and others. An international displaced person, IDP, and apologies if you already know this, I just felt that I couldn't talk to you if we don't get the definitions right. An IDP is someone who is forced to flee their home due to conflict, violence, natural disasters or other crises, but remains within the borders of their own country. And in that case, the responsibility of protection of an IDP falls within the government and authorities of that state. And of course, the UN and UNHCR also seek to protect IDPs. So in addition to the by default duty, responsibility of the state to protect its own citizens if they are moved from one place to another due to any reason, there is also international protection. A stateless person, and again, this is a word that is used a lot in Malaysia, to name pretty much different categories of people. A stateless person is not recognized as a citizen by any country. It's a person that is not recognized. This means that they lack nationality, they live without legal protection or access to basic rights as education, health, employment, the ability to travel because they don't have a passport. And a stateless person, again, faces the challenge of not being able to transmit nationality to their children. So it just creates a cycle of statelessness. I'll move to my last definition, which is the undocumented person. It's not the same as stateless. An undocumented person refers to an individual who is residing in a country without the necessary authorization and legal documentation required by law. And this particularly applies to Malaysia and to Sabah, and we will hear from David later on the situation in Sabah. This typically means the absence of lawful status. Even if we know that these people are, let's say, Malaysian, they just don't happen to have documentation. And they, it can range from not having the national ID card to actually, having some form of inherited document or birth certificate from decades ago. But these people don't have the official documentation to function normally in society. And of course, the threat of being of remaining in the country or not remaining in the country is actually, a continuing threat. Now, of course, and I'm not going to dwell too much on it, one person is not just one thing, right? A migrant can become a refugee. It almost happened to me. I was in Lebanon, my house exploded, I became homeless, and I had to be displaced. And then I had to be evacuated. So I was a migrant in Lebanon, but then I became a refugee, and then I was repatriated. So these definitions actually combine different things. A stateless person can be a refugee. A refugee can be, is an asylum seeker until they are refugees. So please, again, let's make sure that we understand the issues. So when we name and we point and we say, okay, well, they're stateless. Well, their stateless means something, and it means a certain level of duty in addressing their specific needs. Let me share with you, if possible, just a few numbers so you know what we're talking about. I need to stand here. We have, again, the latest 2024 World Migration Report is a report that comes out every year. But usually the data falls back for a few years because by the time all countries report the number of migrants and residents from other countries, it takes some time. But as of now, the estimate is about 300 million. So 300 million migrants in the world, and we are talking about a population of 8 billion. We don't have too many migrants in the world. I mean, right? I'm among 281 or 300 million, but that's not a huge number. You have a disaggregation there by women and men. It's pretty much 49-51. It's been like this. Children constitute quite a number, around 10% usually of the number. Labor migration is definitely the dominant category, but you also have, of course, irregular migration. Among this is about anywhere between 15-18%. So we're not talking about that many irregular migrants. However, we have missing migrants just for this year of about 8,500. And we have some deadly routes for migration. Mediterranean is one of them, but many others. And they're either, dead or missing. So migration is usually a journey that is not necessarily safe. But it can become safe. And I think the policies, that need to be put in place. I used to have a very good friend, Ambassador Lacey Swing. He used to head IOM. I think he passed away here in Malaysia. He loved this country. And he used to say that, that migration is not a problem that needs to be solved. Migration is an issue, is a global phenomenon that needs to be managed. And it's a different approach when you look at something as a problem and when you look at something as a phenomenon that that has its roots back in the age of humanity. Next, please. Okay, trends at a glance in terms of forcibly displaced people. And again, forcibly displaced again is not refugees only; it's different categories. You see the numbers, and we saw in 2022 that we exceeded the 1 million bar, which for the UN was just a very important milestone that we never thought we would face, but it's still growing. And what we're seeing around the world, in Sudan, in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Ukraine, is just resulting in more. I won't go into the details, but it just breaks them down by different categories. But too many people are actually displaced. Too many people have had to leave their homes, and many of those depend on humanitarian assistance to be able to just get by. Next, please. Some solutions, right? Again, for refugees, we always think that there are some possibilities out there. Over the past year, 2023, 6.1 million displaced people have been able to return to their homes, meaning that the conditions at home were, prone to their return. About 160,000 refugees were resettled. When we say resettled, meaning that they transit somewhere and then either resettle in that country or resettle to third countries. There's just my timer. And some, 32,000 people that have been able to receive acknowledgement of their citizenship, either their own or in other countries. Next, please. Malaysia. Again, we keep hearing about refugees, too many, etc. I worked in Lebanon for 10 years, and overnight, pretty much, we moved from a population of 4.5 million to 5.7 million, with 1.2 million refugees coming in just from Syria. Before that, we had waves from Iraq and from, of course, Palestine had been an ongoing, population movement and settlement in camps. Malaysia hosts today, 191,477 refugees that have basically, as I was saying, they filed for a claim, and their claim has been, or their status has been legally recognized as refugees. 20% of them are children, 35% are women and girls, and about 7% are people either with disabilities or special needs. Most of them come from Myanmar at 89%, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, and then you have 2% remaining that come from different parts of the world, including from Palestine. The gender and population structure and that this is public information. It's available. You go to UNHCR website and you get the world report, you get report by country, and you get definitely the breakdown of this by Malaysia, including how many refugees have been resettled to a third country over the past period. And I think until August, about 4,800 have been resettled to other countries that are willing to host refugees. I will conclude with 5 messages, if you allow me, and apologies for taking long. First, human mobility is often misunderstood as something we can fully control and stop. But in reality, it's as old as humanity itself, a natural response to changing circumstances. And those circumstances can be positive or negative. The myth that we can simply erect walls, barbed wires, to shut down or control migration ignores its deep-rooted role in human history. whether through the movement of our ancestors, the blending of cultures, or the global exchange of ideas and people, migration has shaped and will continue to shape who we are as individuals and as societies. Second, we must recognize that human mobility is not an anomaly, but a defining feature of our globalized world. It would be abnormal if in a globalized world people could not move or did not move. Adopting a rights-based approach is no longer just an option, but a necessity. Upholding the dignity and rights of all people on the move is the foundation for a future where migration is seen as a force for good, for connection, and for shared humanity. Third, refugees and migrants aren't the same, and hopefully those definitions will become clearer. Refugees are individuals who flee. Okay, they flee, they escape their home countries due to persecution, conflict, violence, climate change. They seek safety and protection in another country. They're legally recognized under international law and have specific rights. In contrast, migrants move voluntarily or sometimes involuntarily also for various reasons, such as work, education, family, reunification. And while both face challenges, they don't face the same challenges all the time, and they need appropriate policies to manage that type of movement. Fourth, the 1951 Convention, we all hear about the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention, Malaysia is not party to the Geneva Convention. Okay, the Geneva Convention is the Refugee Convention of 1951, and it's 1967 protocol, which basically acknowledges that also movements after 1951 are to be considered and to be addressed under that convention. And they define the term refugee. They outline the rights of the states and legal obligations towards refugees. The core principle is non-refoulement, which means that refugees should not be returned to a country where they face persecution or any form of danger on their lives or freedoms. There are 149 state parties out of 193 member states of the UN, 149 that are parties either to the convention or to the protocol or to both. While the convention and its protocol is a key instrument for protecting displaced populations, non-ratification by certain countries, example Malaysia, does not absolve them, those countries, of the duty to protect refugees. So the card of saying, I'm not party to 51, it's not my problem, does not work simply under international law. Seeking asylum is not a crime. Seeking asylum is a right because people need to survive. And detention is not effective. And there are statistics that are quite interesting on how much detention costs per day per person detained. And that economic, implication for countries is quite interesting to look at. And I don't think it's worth it. It could be invested in education, in health, in other things. Fifth and finally, in a globalized world, the concept of borders has taken a new significance. Population movements, both voluntary and forcible, challenge traditional notions of belonging and raise critical questions about identity, citizenship, and human rights. Borders may delineate, and they do, they delineate nations, but they should not define our humanity. Our humanity should not have borders. We must uphold the principles of empathy, of solidarity and protection, deliver on our collective commitment to protecting the rights and dignity for all individuals.